Alrighty. So now what we're going to do is we are going to talk about the diversity that these guys can have. So one thing that you want to kind of separate out is there's going to be two things that we're looking at. One is going to be how they get energy, and the other one is going to be how they get their carbon source. So energy is just going to be how they power themselves to do their metabolic activity, and carbon is going to be important because we need carbon to make organic molecules because we're all living things, right? So there's two ways that they can get energy, and that's going to be from the sun or from chemicals in the environment. If they get energy from the sun, we call it a phototroph, and if they get energy from chemicals in the environment, they're called chemotrophs. Okay? So those blue-green algae that are photosynthetic, those would be phototrophs, and then something like E. coli would be a chemotroph. Okay? Then the other separation is how they can get their carbon. So if they're going to get their carbon from CO2, they're called autotrophs, and if they're going to get their carbon by ingesting another organism, they're called heterotrophs. Okay? So once again, like that blue-green algae would be an autotroph because they're taking in carbon dioxide. And then a heterotroph, once again, could be E. coli, right? So now I'm really going to blow your minds, and we're going to combine these words. I know, I'm glad I warned you. All right, so now we've got photoautotrophs. So photo is talking about where they get their energy, and that's from light, sunlight. And autotroph means they're going to get their carbon from CO2 in the atmosphere. All right, so cyanobacteria is a great example of that. And to show you a lovely picture of cyanobacteria, it's all that green slime that you see there in that picture. Yummy stuff. All right, next one, chemoautotrophs. Okay, so remember, autotroph is talking about carbon dioxide. Chemo means they're going to get energy from their surrounding environment, from chemicals. So this is going to be something, oh, I'm sorry, there we are. This is going to be something that nitrogen-fixing bacteria can do. So you remember when we talked about the nitrogen cycle and there were those bacteria that were taking in the nitrogen and making it into a form that plants could use? That would be an example of a chemoautotroph. Okay? Now this next one, photoheterotrophs. Photo is talking about energy from light. Heterotroph means that they're going to have to ingest their carbon in some form. This is going to be something that only prokaryotes can do. And if you think about something that is photosynthetic but still has to eat something, that would be it. So an example of that would be this lovely purple and green bacteria that you see here. Yummy again. And then finally, we've got chemoheterotrophs. Chemoheterotrophs, they have to get their energy from their environment, from eating things in their environment, and for their carbon source, they're going to do the same thing. So that's going to be like E. coli. Now what's interesting is you can use these terms to describe other types of cells as well, not just bacteria, right? So like a photoautotroph would be like a plant, and a chemoheterotroph would be like us, right? We have to get our carbon from eating other things that contain it. All right. Now, another little division that we can do with bacteria is depending on how they act with oxygen. So, obligate aerobes, facultative anaerobes, and then obligate anaerobes. So, aero is talking about oxygen. Obligate means they have to have it, right? So, obligate aerobes are going to require oxygen in order for them to do cell respiration. So, they have to have oxygen. That's also what we are, right? We can't live without it. Facultative anaerobes are going to be ones that will use oxygen if it's there, but they can switch over to fermentation if it turns anoxic in their environment. So that's kind of nice. They could switch back and forth. Then you've got obligate anaerobes, and these are going to be ones that cannot handle any type of oxygen, and in fact, if they get exposed to oxygen, it could kill them. All right, so although these guys are tiny and sometimes slimy and sometimes cause issues, they do have a really important ecological role. So we're going to kind of go through those piece by piece. So one of them is going to be those nitrogen-fixing bacteria. If we didn't have those, the nitrogen cycle would just stop. So they're very important for that. Another thing that they can be used for is bioremediation. So let's say you've got an oil spill. There are bacteria that will eat oil and make it into a less harmful form. So they're important for that type of thing. A lot of prokaryotes are going to be symbiotic, and what that means is that we have a lot of bacteria living on us and in us, and it's super important, right? That's why it's kind of, we get these secondary infections sometimes from taking antibiotics because they're kind of broad spectrum and they kill the good and the bad bacteria. So we have bacteria all over us that's helpful. They can be used in industry, so it's really interesting. They're feeding some bacteria a certain diet, and what their byproduct is biodegradable plastic. So we can use them to make biodegradable plastic. How cool would that be? And then other things they can do is they can be creating biofuels. So we use a lot of cyanobacteria to make those biofuels. They can be used to make vitamins and hormones through their metabolic activity as well. Another important thing about bacteria that some people get upset about, but it's true, is that they cause disease. So they're really good at population control. And there's two ways that they can do it. They can have exotoxins and endotoxins. Exotoxins are going to be some type of protein that a prokaryote excretes out into an organism and makes them sick. And this is what causes cholera and botulism. And then you've got endotoxins, and endotoxins are actually going to be components of like the gram-negative bacteria's little membrane that's on the outside of their cell wall, and that's like what causes salmonella. So endotoxins are actually in the membrane. Exotoxins are secreted by the membrane. And then the last thing we're going to finish up with are going to be the Archaeobacteria. Very, very crazy bacteria, live in very extreme environments. And I've listed just a few of the divisions you can kind of put them in. And first one is extreme halophiles. So phile means you like something, and halo is talking about salt. So these are organisms that really like living in salty environments, and I think I've got a cool picture to show you. Yeah, this is from the Dead Sea, and you can actually see that's extremely salty, and there's really not much that lives there, but those extreme halophiles are like, oh, this is great, we love it salty. So that's one example. Then you've got extreme thermophiles. So thermo is talking about temperature, right? So these can live in very, very hot environments, like in a hot spring or in hydrothermal vents. I think I've got a cool picture. Yeah, so like that's a geyser, right? So they would really thrive in there. And then this is a picture of a hydrothermal vent. All right. And then the last one, methanogens. Methanogens are going to be ones that live in areas where there's no oxygen, and so they actually produce methane. That's where their name comes from. So methane is CH4, which is a fart, and it stinks, right? So basically these guys are in stinky areas usually. They can live under ice, they can live in swamps, they can even live in the guts of herbivores. And so here I actually have a picture of termites, and there is bacteria that lives in the gut of these termites to help them break down all that cellulose that they eat. And so we're going to actually look at that in the lab where we do prokaryotes and protists. So pretty cool. And then the last pictures I have here, this is actually Archaeobacteria that's living in ice, a methanogen. And it's crazy because it looks like the ice is bleeding, but that's actually the bacteria that are coming out of there. So kind of cool. And then this last one is kind of depressing. This is mining runoff that has an extreme, usually acidic pH, and they've actually found new Archaeobacteria that are living in there. So we're kind of causing evolution with our pollution, which is scary to me. But anyway, there are things that can actually live in that. Okay, so that's prokaryotes, and hope you enjoyed it. They're all over you, so you should.